We had a nice warm bowl of chili for dinner, and we're enjoying some libations.
Yeah, we had to choose between two different Witch's Brew.
Witch's Brew, yeah, from competing companies.
Options.
So we'll give that a try. And then, of course, for dessert, we're going to go with a Scream egg.
The Cadbury.
Yes. Cadbury Scream. It feels like there should be a pun in there, but I can't find it.
Well, it's the cream egg.
Scream instead of cream.
Yeah.
I'm slow. This is going to be a long one. And it's so funny because almost a year ago, a little bit over, I mean, by a week, a year ago, we visited a haunted, like a phenomenally, wonderfully, epically haunted place and then covered
Paranormal.
The Mothman.
Yeah, Paranormal Epicenter.
And we went to another one about a year later. A bucket list type of place for me, just like the Mothman and Point Pleasant was. And we went down to Adams, Tennessee, and there's no coincidence. This is on purpose that we're drinking the Witch's Brew. Because we visited the site of the Bell Witch haunting. America's most well-documented, as they always like to proclaim, most well-documented haunting. I am joined once again by the lovely and talented Miss Wendy Lynn Stotts, who herself is a tour guide of haunted Waukesha, Wisconsin, and a great violinist and drummer for the paranormal rock band Sunspot, and also, as the resume continues, co-host of the See You on the Other Side podcasts, where you can, every week, listen to a new, about hour-long episode, oftentimes interviewing experts in the paranormal or just having fun conversations with a round table on just all sorts of wacky stuff.
Yes, that's what we like.
Is there an episode recently that you liked a lot that people should, if they've never heard one, but they want to hear a recent one that you should definitely go to first?
Episode 213, where we talk about the autumnal equinox, which just occurred, so it's rather relevant.
Actually, we're on the autumnal equinox today, as we're recording this right now, which makes all the sense in the world that we might be talking about witchcraft.
Ooh la la.
And the movie that covers this story is An American Haunting, with Donald Sutherland, who he's got this huge body of work, but I just see him as President Snow from the Hunger Games forever now. This terrible, awful human being. Which he kind of plays a little bit of a terrible, awful human being in this movie too.
A little bit.
And perhaps unfairly, perhaps like if that's not true, what the movie gets into, which we'll get into what we're hinting at now, really horrible jump for a writer to make just for the sake of making the story more interesting.
Right.
The first time I ever heard about the Bell Witch story was several years ago now. This is how it's built. It's the only ghost story where someone dies by the hand of a ghost. Which, of course, is intriguing.
Very dramatic.
Yeah, and I actually believe that there are more stories than just this one. I did a whole documentary on one that might be a serial killing ghost, I guess you would say. We gotta acknowledge the time and place. So we are, even today, it's crazy rural. So this is in the middle of nowhere.
Beautiful, beautiful countryside.
Yes, absolutely is. But, you know, think back to when this was going on, the 18 teens. America's very young still. And Nashville, the next biggest city, is still tiny at this point, I'm sure. So this is really very remote. You are far from the colonies at this point. It all stemmed from, and we see this depicted pretty well, I think, in the movie, a dispute between John Bell, who owned this huge area. Today, there's so much that is even Bell High School still. There's lots of locations in Adams, Tennessee that still have the Bell name on it because they own so much land around that area. But there was a dispute with a neighbor, and allegedly she maybe placed a curse on him. Maybe she was into witchcraft and summoned some dark entity to
in the movie. She definitely did. Yes.
Whatever the case, even today she gets blamed. Kate Betts was her name, and the funny thing is, for all the research I've been doing, I don't see anybody going to her grave to do EVP sessions and investigate if there's anything paranormal going on.
That would be interesting.
Or she's buried, or at the Kate Betts home, because if she was into witchcraft, she was probably doing all sorts of stuff.
If she had the power to summon that, I mean,
my gosh.
like the most evil, the most prominent and active, you know, ghost.
Yeah, spirit, whatever,
I mean,
demon.
That's some serious power.
Yeah, so you would think that there would be stuff going on where she resided.
I would think.
Where she laid her wicked head.
Right.
I love it because so many elements of the Bell Witch story made me think of the Mothman story. Because there's so many different facets of activity going on here.
Yes.
And how does it start? It starts with a cryptid.
Cryptid.
Yeah.
It's like the harbinger.
I know. It's crazy because we went and we took the tour and got to see the cave and they were telling the story and all that. But the person who gave us the tour, who was the owner of the land now, which is pretty neat that you can take a tour of such a haunted place by a person that's owned it for the last 25 years.
Also pretty neat that you can find the Bell Witch Cave in the Thrifty Nickel.
Yes.
Which is where she said they saw it listed when it was up for sale.
But I had to ask because as she was explaining everything and talking about all these different elements, it just made me think of the Mothman story, which of course has Men in Black and it's got UFO sightings and of course cryptid sightings and spirit communication, which both stories have a lot of. I had to ask, I don't hear anything about a cryptid yet for the Bell Witch story, and so I asked her, is there any reports of odd creatures in this area? And she said, well, it all started with this black creature that John Bell saw while hunting. It's kind of like a dog, but with the head of a rabbit. And apparently fired, took several shots at it, which this does come across in the movie as well. Everybody's so quick to jump on, what did Hollywood get wrong? Or what terrible liberties did they take? All that stuff. But which we already talked about, one that we'll get back to. But I always find it so much more intriguing and amazing. Where did Hollywood get it exactly right? Because that's chilling, I think.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's interesting about this case too, I think, is in a lot of Hollywood movies, they exaggerate things because the story itself might have a kernel of something interesting or spooky, but it's kind of boring. There's not, something happened worthy of generating more to make it sensational. But this case is so scary in and of itself, and it's so well documented as one of the better documented of that day and age. Like you said, documented, I guess, in the form of journals and things like that.
Yeah, it's first-hand accounts, lots of different witnesses. Yeah,
but the stories of what happened there, and I guess we can talk about that a bit.
yeah. So it started with the cryptid sighting, and then it evolved into sounds heard on the house, heard on the outside of the house.
The stuff nightmares are made of.
Exactly. And they thought that
knocking.
Kate Betts was maybe taunting them. Maybe she was sending some of her slaves over, because this is that era. The sounds begin on the outside of the house and then begin to happen on the inside of the house. And not too long after that, violence. I mean, it leaped several steps in getting acquainted.
Oh my gosh.
There are so few stories, so few locations that are associated with physical contact. And especially violent physical contact. Maybe it's not super duper unheard of to feel a tap on the shoulder or something like that, but it's usually very, very light. And of course, when you're talking about the tactile sense, walking into a cold spot, in a way, is touching the paranormal, or the paranormal touching you. But to be slapped around, which is what happened over and over and over again. And it's taken to a pretty extreme level in the movie.
Oh, gosh.
Some of it very well done, I thought. The hair pulling was depicted well.
Yeah.
And
it was the daughter who experienced a lot of it. So it's unfortunate in the movie watching this cute little girl,
of course,
getting beaten up by an invisible force.
Yeah, be absolutely manhandled. And that was Betsy Bell. And something that was depicted in the movie that is reported was not only hair pulling, but her hair being tied around a bedpost, which that's a prankster spirit if I've ever heard one. Yeah. A very, very malevolent one. Of course, in the movie, we see her be lifted by her hair and she's dangling. Yeah. Which I don't think that was ever reported. I think maybe they built that one up a little bit.
Definitely a visual for a horror movie.
No, absolutely great, memorable. It was absolutely effective. The cave, which was our main focus when we were on location there, barely at all appears in the movie. And in truth, it doesn't have a huge part of the story.
No, but it's spooky.
No, it's definitely spooky. In the movie, it just kind of comes across as a bizarre moment in a dream sequence. Yeah. Almost like maybe the writer felt an obligation to include this place, although he didn't really know much what to do with it. But let's give it some service, and then we'll move on with the rest of the story that I'm planning on telling.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting too that the cave. I guess I've fallen to the marketing and the hype. But like the cave is what I always hear about, the Bell Witch Cave.
Absolutely.
Bell Witch Cave. And so, not knowing the whole story initially, I assumed that that was where most of the action was, and you know, we found out that it wasn't. It does play a role in the story, of course. Right as we were entering the cave into the main kind of large area, she told us a story about that back when the Bells were living there, some of the children went down and they were playing in the cave, and I guess a little boy crawled up, and she pointed at a specific kind of little small part of the cavern that I guess he crawled into and got stuck, and then he felt a hand like pull him out and free him from where he was stuck. And then there was a voice that said like, I don't know, some kind of scolding, like,
just don't you do that again.
Or whatever, so.
Otherwise we would have had the first 127 hours movie. And that was kind of a neat thing though. The witch protected that boy.
Or she wanted her space to herself, maybe. That's
very possibly true. But when Betsy got sick at one point in time, apparently there was the witch's voice came across singing Bible songs to her. So it was in some ways very positive and comforting, but of course in other ways insanely violent. And we never see, when you understand why in the movie, you never really see any of the positivity.
No. I mean, the weird part of the story is about how she like didn't want Betsy to marry one of the neighbors or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that just seems so weird to me for a paranormal entity to care that much about, like, don't you dare marry. Like, she was she protecting her from something, or was she jealous? You know, was the witch jealous?
Sure.
I don't know. He was kind of a catch in the movie.
Yeah. So. He looked like Josh Hartnett. Like, don't marry him. I want him.
He's too hot for you. In the movie, I didn't feel captured this as well as all the things I've read about it, but the big thing with the witch is the voice. She would prophecy things. She would like predict the you know, or claim she could predict the future and give warnings, and you know, like you were saying, she could be soothing too, apparently. But it's just imagining something that tangible as hearing like the voice of a woman just screaming these things out, or you know, it's just so hard for me to fathom that. And in the movie, they really, really heavily covered the physical violence of her. So much, but there wasn't a ton of the, you know, voice.
The rest of it. As a screenwriter, trying to put this all together, here was one of his biggest challenges. This is such a big story, and it happens for a while. All of these different events happen, then it's dormant for 7 years, and then it comes back, and a whole bunch more activity happens. In the movie, you don't see that at all. It looks like this outburst of time that maybe covers a month and a half or something like that.
Also, she came, the 7 years, during that time, I mean, John Bell died.
Yes.
So it's like she hated John Bell. She was after him, they think. They think she claimed that she was responsible for his death even. But the fact that, you know, it's like she accomplished that, I guess, and then years later she still came back like she said she would. So that I think is strange, because it seems to me like if there's something unsettled, or like a spirit that's like, okay, I'm angry with this guy, I have to take care of this, like take care of it and then be on your way.
Exactly. The school teacher, Josh Gardner, he's able to, he goes from being a skeptic to being a believer really quickly, like suspiciously quick. But, you know, okay, we'll just rush that.
When you see the kid levitating and like getting slapped by invisible, like, I guess.
Now, he was still a skeptic at that point, even though the door was held closed by some unseen force until it burst open, and he saw this girl getting slapped around, and he was thinking, well, maybe she was having a seizure. Maybe this X, Y, and Z was happening, and he was still a non-believer. And then suddenly, while they're in the living room having a conversation, the knocking starts, some voices are heard and all that, and he begins to just reach out and try to have some communication.
That did surprise me, I have to say.
You said it in the moment, like, wow, he somehow he got through that last thing no problem, but suddenly now he's a believer. And
you wouldn't expect somebody to go that quickly from, no, because he was, in the movie, he was very, there's a scientific cause for this and this, but to go from that to like, are you in the room, and like trying to talk directly to, you know, it just seemed, it seemed like he might be, okay, let's observe for a bit here. Before.
And so I thought maybe he was testing the waters, but he still wouldn't be sold on it. But no, from that moment he was a believer moving forward. And but that is kind of one of the few times that we ever see communication happen, where they're asking questions and trying to get some answers out. But as we know in the real story, this thing would like hold fireside chats and have full conversations with humans and not just the Bell family.
Yes.
There's a very dramatic action moment in the movie where they decide we need to leave this land because the witch is stuck on this land, and they're driving away, horse and carriage. The witch frantically goes through all the drawers in the house and realizes, oh no, the people are gone. Let me go find them, and then makes a tree fall and big, catastrophe. And then we see some like hounds of hell come out of nowhere to attack. None of that stuff happened.
Good Hollywood moments, though.
It was good. But what's interesting, and I think more interesting, is that the witch was encountered all over town when this was going on. And they even talked about it on our tour, that the witch was seen, or not seen, but experienced at this one church that still stands, and it's got a historical marker on it that talks about the Bell Witch. So I think anytime a movie tries to tell a story and they make it smaller, I hate that.
Yeah.
Because to show that, oh my gosh, this thing is limitless, it is boundless, and the Bell family, they were allowed to leave their land.
Right.
But that didn't mean that they were free. And people outside the family were experiencing this all the time, including one would-be future president.
Indeed.
Which this is not depicted in the movie. And again, what an awesome moment to say, well, no, we won't use that.
And that particular gentleman, one Andrew Jackson, caught my eye when we got to the...
No, he was a looker. Sorry.
No. Sorry. When we went into the gift shop to buy our tickets for the tour, they have articles all over the walls, and all the different little photos, and just it's neat. It's kind of like
clippings
it's like a little mini museum and letters from people, and just and I started reading an article, and it talked about how Andrew Jackson had been there and was so terrified by it that he said it was like scarier than the prospect of going back to war. And I was like, whoa, hold on. Wait a minute. Like, a former president was here and then like said that publicly.